for connecting to this webinar. I'm very happy to see that we are getting so many people from Japan to Americas. So thank you, and I think it's quite an interesting topic we bring today. So just I'm going to briefly explain a bit about ISGAN. Next slide. So ISGAN is the International Smart Grid Action Network, and this is created in partnership with the Energy Agency, International Energy Agency, sorry, and the Clean Energy Ministerial, and it's a joint initiative and is the only, let's say, high government knowledge transfer platform to accelerate the deployment and the development of smart, cleaner electricity grids around the world. And we are organized under different annexes. So each annex is a different working group where you can see in the presentation. So we are 8 annexes, and this webinar is part of the activities we do in Annex 8, the ISGAN Academy on the smart grids. We also have other annexes looking at, for instance, different case studies, Annex 2, Annex 3, looking at cost-benefit analysis and toolkits, Annex 4, sharing insights and for decision makers, Annex 5, looking at international research facility network, Annex 6, power transmission and distribution grid system, and Annex 7, smart grid transition. So next slide, you can see the countries that are part of ISGAN, our association, and we are at 26 countries all over the world. We are getting members, as you can see, we are quite distributed and open. Of course, new members will join in the coming months as well. So next slide. So what we do, we look at strategic partnerships with the International Energy Agency, other activities that are going on there, also with the Clean Energy Ministerial, to the Smart Grid Forum, mission innovation activities as well. So we have also international broad expert network, such as the ones that are now today. So also looking at global, regional, and national policy support and knowledge sharing on different projects coordination. How do we do that? Through different means. We have a conference presentation, policy brief, technological brief, technical papers, discussion papers, workshops, case studies, and webinars such as this one. And myself, I'm in charge of this, to lead this activity and to organize the webinars as the one of today. You can visit our website there, so you can find all this material that are public available. So next slide. Just so to briefly introduce today's presentation, the presenters will show different challenges and opportunities for business models to enable the integration of hard penetration of distributed resources based on current trends and opportunities that digitalization brings to the grid, and use in this the flexibility from different resources. The main focus will be on distribution system operators, aggregators, end users, and other actors such as data service providers. So the presenters of today are Ricardo Prata from Distribución, addressing the challenges on DSOs, distribution system operators. Then my colleague Rafael Cosend will present the business model for distribution grid stakeholders. And finally, Ricardo Bessa from INESTEC, a research institute in Portugal, will present network operation tools to enable the use of this flexibility available distribution network. So thank you, everyone, and Ricardo, thank you. You can continue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ricardo Prata from EDP Distribution. I'll show you a brief introduction on the InteGrid project and how it helps us to address the challenges of the DSO. First, I'll present the InteGrid project and EDP distribution. I'll talk a bit about the challenges faced by DSOs associated with energy transition, how the InteGrid project addresses those challenges and proposes new solutions, and then I'll conclude my presentation. So the InteGrid project is a project joining 14 partners from 8 member states of the European Union. It is coordinated by EDP distribution and funded by the European Commission with a budget of 15 million euros. And it's a project that will end this year after more than 3-year effort. And it's about centering the energy system on the end user. How to foster flexibility and how to provide technological solutions that enable that flexibility, and how they should be implemented, and how can the energy system distributor help to support those solutions that will enable flexibility for the end user, thus creating conditions for an increase in renewable generation, for the appearance of electrical vehicles, the opportunities that are associated with the deployment of storage, and how will those all those devices interconnect with the energy system. So EDP distribution is the Portuguese DSO on the mainland Portugal. We serve more than 6 million end users on a population of 10 million people. A third of them already have smart meters installed in their homes. And we have we operate the high voltage, medium voltage and low voltage network in the country. And as DSOs, we now face several challenges. Distributed generation is increasing. We can see in this graph that we had a large increase in the first decade of the century. In the last few years, that increase has reduced. But looking into the past, that increase was mostly associated with the development of wind energy systems. We already have a large proportion of our energy produced by wind, and now, like in most of Southern Europe, we are expecting a very large increase in energy generated by PV. So there is a trend on the increase of the generation associated with distribution networks, and not only in high voltage and medium voltage networks, but also increasingly associated with low voltage networks. Also, we expect an increase of electrical vehicles with their charging patterns, storage, and how to manage that. We have to foster flexibility in order to make sure that we can properly meet supply and demand. Let me show these diagrams that illustrate the uncertainty that we have considering the management of distribution systems. We are used to one direction load flows from transmission to the end user, which had a load diagram that was pretty much predictable. we could predict that load diagram with a large certainty, particularly when we are aggregating on the median voltage and high voltage levels. But then we start to have ever more PV generation, and PV generation has some unpredictable. It's associated with the sun conditions. Of course, we know that we don't have any production during nighttime, and it also varies during the year. This is an example of a typical load diagram for a summer day with some uncertainty associated with the load diagram. And also wind, which with a much more unpredictable generation pattern. It can produce during each time of the day and of the year, and it tends to vary a lot within short periods. So while we were used to having this end user very regular load diagram associated with power flows on the grid, now we have a mix of several different load diagrams which will add up, and on top of that we will also have to consider what will happen when we start to having ever more consumption associated with electrical vehicles. And so on the InteGrid project, in order to tackle those challenges, we've joined several partners from several areas of expertise, ICT companies, research institutions, industry, and DSOs, and also energy consumers and entities associated with the energy market, in order to together to try to find the answers to these challenges, how to address these unpredictable load diagrams, how to avoid the need to reinforce networks beyond what will be required if we can model properly those load diagrams, and how to optimize the energy use of the system. As I mentioned, placing the end user at the center of the system, enabling to decide what are the best solutions for him given the market conditions on each instant. And with that, trying to create an electrical power system that addresses all these needs and avoid that overinvestment that would result from the traditional fit and forget network planning methodology that basically would consider the worst case scenario and deploy the assets necessary to address that worst case scenario. And so we are developing solutions that enable stakeholders to participate in the energy market. We are developing 3 demos in Portugal, Slovenia, and Sweden. And one of the main aspects of this demo and this rationale is the concept of this grid market hub that will be a facilitator to channel the signals that will be associated with constraints appearing on the network or on the production system, by translating them into price signals that the end user can use in order to allow them to manage their electricity usage and to sell, let's say, so the flexibility according with those price signals. So the Grid Market Hub is a tool that will facilitate the appearance of the flexibility concept. It will enable grid functions through a cloud base. The Grid Market Hub is based on a cloud. It will facilitate the link between the several stakeholders and will facilitate the evolution of new business service and enabling the retailers and the aggregators to create new business service. So this will be an infrastructure that will allow these business services to be created. And so it will help us to connect all of the stakeholders of the electrical energy system into a coherent platform that will facilitate these energy transactions. We are doing a study with bearing in mind this concept. As I mentioned, using those 3 case studies in Portugal, Slovenia, and Sweden, in how this will result in the cooperation between different stakeholders, and addressing also how does this concept can create value for the system. For the Portuguese case study, we are using as a reference low voltage and medium voltage networks, assessing the behavior of those networks associated with expected load growth and generation growth that will appear associated with networks, measuring the constraints that we expect and which might lead to the need to reinforce those networks, and with that principle, assessing how the flexibility concept can help us to avoid or postpone investments. We are also dealing with, as I mentioned, a large consumer. So we are also assessing his willingness to participate in the flexibility markets, which part of the energy demand that he has might be subject to market mechanisms, might be managed with some flexibility. We are still doing some trials also on low voltage end users. Still no results on those trials. They are still ongoing, but they are related with the installation of smart appliance with a home energy management system associated with them that can communicate with the market hub. And so with those smart appliances, creating the possibility of also having some flexibility in the management of the demand of homeowners. And all of these principles are being evaluated under a CBA to assess if they actually allow us to increase the value for the system. We are also looking into the regulatory framework on 4 countries. Rafael will go into that with more detail, but also to understand how the regulatory frameworks are coherent with this flexibility paradigm, and how can they foster the development of these business models. So this concludes my presentation. Thanks for your attention, and I'll be willing to answer questions at the end of the presentations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo. May I go back? So now it's my turn. My name is Rafael Cosent. I'm a researcher at Comillas University in Madrid, as Jose Pablo mentioned before. And my role now is, because Ricardo Prata focused a lot on the challenges and the new roles DSOs are being asked to adopt in this new environment. So my goal now is to broaden a little bit the scope and focus on the new or existing stakeholders around distribution grids and distribution system operators that may be part and adopt new business models. Okay, so that's my main goal, to give you a few highlights. But first, let me guide you through the overall process we are following in InteGrid, this European project, to assess the business models. I mean, our starting point were, of course, the functionalities developed in the project and tested in the demonstrators, as Ricardo Prata just mentioned. So the first step is, okay, the first question is, from these functionalities, what new business models may appear? That's the first step we followed. But at this point, we just have kind of a theoretical list of business models. And how do we analyze whether these business models have potential and make sense or not? I mean, this is quite a multifaceted problem. So we tackled it from different angles, okay? So first, we need to perform a cost-benefit analysis to assess if these business models, I mean, if there is a business case behind the business models, and what are the main factors that affect the economic feasibility of the models. But of course, even if there is economic potential, regulation, I mean, this is the electricity markets and electricity networks are quite regulated systems. So regulation is a central piece of the puzzle. Current regulation, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, really may not be fit for purpose. Okay, so we need to identify and assess these barriers and eventually provide recommendations to overcome them. And the first step is, I mean, we realize that in some of these business models that we discuss now, we are not starting from scratch. In some cases, there are already companies active in the markets that are trying to adopt similar business models and make a profit of that. So we wanted also to analyze these real life cases to try to learn from them, see the strategies they are following and where they are following this, to try to get the lessons learned, okay, to our analysis. And last but not least, you may have a business model perfectly defined that shows a lot of economic feasibility potential. Current regulation is perfectly fit for purpose, it's in place, but then nothing happens. And nothing happens sometimes because the stakeholders that should be part of this business model as customers, as enablers, simply they are not doing their part. They may not do their part because they are not interested, because they don't have information, or they find it very complicated, okay? So also, in order to identify these potential barriers related to the perspective of stakeholders, we carried out a consultation on different stakeholders. So in this case, for instance, we did one-on-one interviews with members of DSOs, regulators, retailers, industrial consumers, consumer associations, to really discuss with them the business models, see what they thought about them, whether they made sense, and what were the barriers and there is the interest in these business models. Okay, so all these should fit our final business model analysis that should be ready in a couple of months. And before we proceed to discussing business models, I have one, let's say, request for you. I finished the previous slide by referring to a stakeholder consultation, and we want you actually to be part of this consultation. I mean, I'm pretty certain most of you here are somehow related to the power sector, from academia, from network operators, from policymakers, regulators. So your opinion matters to us, okay? So if you would be so kind, we have set up an online questionnaire with like 15, 18 questions that will take you 10, 15 minutes tops to answer, about basically what you think on these business models and the main barriers or challenges, let's say, they may face. Okay? So please, your opinion is important for us. And after this request from my side, apologies for that, but we do stress that your opinion is important and it really helps us get the best quality reports on business models. I want to focus on the business models tested in InteGrid, but since in this webinar we may have people, as Jose Paulo mentioned, from Japan to the Americas, I think it's good to introduce you a little bit into some of the European policy background. Because, you know, we have our own jargon in the energy sector in Europe, so it's good to basically catch up to understand the rest of the context of the rest of the presentation. Okay? So where we are now? Well, right now in Europe, the European Union has defined the 2030 energy policy goals. These goals are related to the decarbonization of the energy system, the increase in the use of renewable energies, and increasing the efficiency of the use of this energy. Okay? But these are the high-level goals at energy level. You need in place the right policy and regulatory framework, basically to set up the right incentives for these goals to be achieved, because you require really the involvement of many different actors and stakeholders. And this was the work that the European Union has been doing over the last few years. And in between the end of 2018 and the first semester of 2019, what we had was the approval of what is known as the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. This is no more than a set of European directives and regulations, essentially pieces of European legislation, that then the countries, parts of the European Union need to translate into national regulation and legislation. And a central part of this package of the new energy policy in Europe is the electricity system. Okay? Essentially, because in order to achieve these goals, there are two unavoidable steps. You need to electrify several energy uses, transportation, heating and cooling, and you need to decarbonize electricity system, okay? In practice, those are the key strategic points to achieve these goals. So that is why the electricity system is becoming central in the overall energy system in Europe. And in order to achieve this transition in the electricity system, there are two key topics that are considered essential, okay, to achieve this in an efficient way. One is the digitalization, the deployment of smart meters and increased monitoring and control of the distribution grid that Ricardo Prata mentioned is a part of this digitalization process of the overall power system. And the other is the use of flexibility. By use of flexibility means that now you can no longer have balancing services provided only by large generators. You need everybody, demand response, small scale storage, aggregation that can provide this flexibility in the markets, energy and balancing markets should do so. And quite a new topic is the use of this flexibility to avoid distributional constraints and eventually in the long term reduce the need to reinforce the grid. This is basically a complete change in paradigm in the way distribution grids have been planned and operated traditionally, as Ricardo Prata mentioned. So these topics of digitalization and flexibility use are, this is how they basically piece together with the overall energy policy goals. So this is just a quick policy background on the European context. But now my topic is on business models. Business models require the involvement of stakeholders. And essentially, I have tried to map here in a very simple way the way we see the mapping of these stakeholders. So on the left, you would have the existing actors that will receive, let's say, or will procure or buy data-based and flexibility services. So we have grid operators, system operators, and then consumers as the main, let's say, buyers or customers of these new services. And on the right-hand side of the slide, of the screen, you have new agents or existing agents that increase their portfolio of services that provide these data or flexibility services to the system operators and the consumers. But if you allow me to focus in the rest of my presentation is on the ones that are depicted in the middle. And for instance, Ricardo Prata mentioned before the Grid and Market Hub as a key enabler, facilitator for the functions of the project. Because really, in order to basically the guys on the left to procure the services and the guys on the right to provide the services, we see more and more that we need some new enablers, some middlemen, okay? And who are these middlemen? Well, we have the platforms related to metering data management. We have, if we are going to use flexibilities at local level to operate the distribution grid, we need platforms to operate these local markets. And last but not least, we need flexibility operators. You may call them grid or power plants, aggregators, because if you have a look at the flexibility providers, many of these would be small residential consumers, commercial consumers, small scale renewable generation. I mean, really, these people do not have the know-how, the technology, and the size, to be true, to probably participate and comply with the requirements of wholesale markets, balancing markets, for instance. So you need some intermediary, some middleman that aggregates all these small sources of flexibility, okay, and acts as an interface between the providers and the markets, okay, or the procurement of the services. And this is the role of these flexibility operators, okay. So here we'll discuss later on where the new business models are appearing and whether these are regulated or competitive or so. Okay. So let me just, without any further ado, move on, focusing, as I said, on the guys in the middle. So these enablers, that these roles or functions may be played by existing companies, or you may see new entrants, okay, new companies focusing on this specific sector. So regarding metering data management, I mean, you know, smart meters are capable to produce a huge volume of data, okay? And the thing is that this data, additionally to simply monthly billing, okay, has a lot of potential, okay, for energy services. But in order for this to be a reality, you need some sort of data management procedure, okay? This is the role of these data management platforms. In Europe, really, we are seeing a trend towards a centralized regulated hub. This is what we call in Europe the central data hub model. Okay, so you have an independent, if you want, a single company in each country that collects all the metering data and manages the access to all the different stakeholders' interest in using those data to provide services to other business, the business-to-business approach, or the business-to-customer approach. Okay, yeah. So basically, this is the model we are more and more countries are focusing on in Europe. This centralized data hub. This is a regulated activity, so there is no competition. The revenues of these companies are regulated. Where we are seeing alternatives is in terms of the ownership or the organizational structure. In some countries, they decided that this role should be adopted by an existing agent like the DSO. In other countries, it's several grid operators, distribution system operators are kind of agreeing on setting up a company devoted to this altogether and outsourcing the operation, as in Belgium. Or in the UK, for instance, they decided to allocate this license. So this activity of data management would be supplied, would be provided, would be developed by a new company, new entrant, a private company that simply earns the right to provide this service, regulated service. So this is the market trend we are seeing in Europe, okay? Or business model, if you want, self-regulated business model. Now, regarding the second type of platform I mentioned before, this is the local flexibility market platforms. I mean, at first you may think that, I mean, this is a way in which grid operators, distribution network operators, buy services from the grid users. So in principle, it may seem apparent that this would be necessarily part of the day-to-day operations of the network operator and part of the regulated activities of the grid operator. But you have, for instance, the example of this company, Piclo, that has a platform called Piclo Flex. This is an active platform active in the UK that is completely independent, and simply they are offering the platform to grid operators, DNOs, distribution network operators, and in exchange for a fee, they can make public their flexibility needs in this platform. They use a geographical information system where in this part of the grid, I need this amount of flexibility upwards, downwards, means increasing demand, reducing demand, depending on what is causing the grid constraint. And I will need it in summer 2021, in this, as the example shown in this slide. And I'm willing to pay you this much for providing me this service. In this case, 47 Great British pound per megawatt hour. So this is no more than a local market, okay? And in the end, the distribution company is buying flexibility from whoever wants to provide this flexibility. But you see a new company that saw a business opportunity here and is reaping, basically trying to make a profit of setting up this local platform. What is the advantage? Is that here you have a single platform for all DNOs, grid operators in the UK. So if you're a flexibility operator, you do not need to start registering, adopting interfaces, communication systems. with one different platform per grid operator. You have a common one. Okay? So there is a business potential and not a regulated activity. But of course, this is similar to what the GM hub, this greater market hub of InteGrid, wants to do. This is in the end metering and local market platform in a sense. Okay? But how do we take this basically to commercial operation? We face significant barriers. Okay? I will not go into all the details on the barriers, but I think in this case, the key barrier is mostly on the regulatory side. Okay? Because at least nowadays in most European countries, really DNOs have a big incentive to keep investing and not avoid investments, okay, if they can. Because essentially buying flexibility services will mean increase my operational expenditures, because I need to pay for these services at the expense of reducing investments. But really, the regulation is pushing grid operators in the opposite direction: reduce operational expenditures and maintain, okay, at least not reduce significantly investments, okay, to keep the asset base and the remuneration. So this bias towards CapEx is, from what we see, a main barrier that is not easy to remove. And actually, the regulators we've been discussing realize this, but really don't have a clear way forward to adopt a better regulation, okay, to promote flexibility. Of course, on the technical side, the limited monitoring and control capabilities in the medium and low voltage grids is a key barrier, and that's what Ricardo Esa will discuss in a while. Okay? And also, we should not neglect the fact that this can represent a big change in paradigm or in practices of distribution grid operators. So also in our conversation with distribution companies, they think, the people we've discussed with, they think that internally adopting this change may also face some internal opposition, essentially because relying on a third party may be seen as unreliable, okay, from the grid operator. These people are used to having strong, robust assets there in place for 30, 40 years, and start depending on an independent companies or end users. They perceive that as a big risk. So they may not be that willing to do so, okay, even if you adopt a new regulation. So these are the main barriers we have identified basically in a quick summary. Now, that's on the metering and local market platform. The third type of enabler or facilitator for the use of flexibility is this retro plant or aggregator, one type of aggregator, okay? Essentially, these guys getting into contracts with a large number of small generators or small consumers, aggregate all the potential flexibility and provide services to DSOs, or even participate in energy markets. As compared to the previous one, this is already an active activity in many countries. And here you have the several number of companies we have identified in some European and non-European countries, but still it is pretty much dependent on regulation. So on the right-hand side, you see a map, and in dark orange is what this publication, this Smart-N institution, says that the markets are mature. Look, here market maturity does not mean that these aggregators are very large companies and have a huge market share. It means that a lot of the regulatory barriers have been removed, okay? That doesn't mean that the market share is high, okay? And if you cross-check the number of companies with the map on the right, you see that essentially most of the companies are active in those countries where the market barriers and regulation has been changed, modified, okay? So this is a business model so far pretty much dependent on the regulation and market rules. So already quite a few active companies in the sector. What are the strategies, business strategies we have identified? Well, this depends on the level of maturity, okay, of the sector. First, usually these companies start as independent companies developing software, okay? And once they have the software, they try to sell the software itself. So this is the software as a service. So I have retailers that usually do not manage a lot the internal consumer, the internal demand, for instance, to minimize imbalances. And so I can sell them the software so that they increase internally their operation. Okay? So I'm just a software company. The next step is I start providing services. If the market rules do not allow me to go into the energy or the balancing markets, I then turn my attention to the end users, and I can use this kind of software to provide them with energy management services. For instance, to reduce demand charges. Some countries Large consumers or some consumers pay a charge in euros, in dollars per kilowatt. So this type of companies with this software, for instance, they can reduce the energy bill of end users, providing this service, okay, of energy management to reduce network charges. This is one business strategy, one revenue stream that we observed. And in the most advanced stages, these guys are already, when market conditions allow for that, they are participating as market agents, either in partnership with existing retailers, maybe because they are independent, but they get into an agreement, or sometimes some of these companies started as a software company, and then a large incumbent came in and acquired the company because they saw a potential there in buying this company. And lastly, they can become an independent aggregator. And this is a new agent, including the previous, in the Kennedy package that I mentioned before, that is still under development. In the end, this is a different market agent, different from the existing retailers or suppliers, okay, that only manage flexibility. They do not sell energy to final consumers. Okay? So these are the different strategies and roles we've seen for these retail plans or aggregators. But of course, I mentioned this depends a lot on your market rules. Okay, and the main barrier, for instance, InteGrid is a company that is part of the consortium of InteGrid. And the main barriers that they are facing is that sometimes they aggregate demand, but market rules do not allow demand to participate. And even if demand may participate in these markets, sometimes the market rules and the products are not well suited for demand because they were designed in thinking on a system where only that generators provided these services. So they may have troubles, basically these troubles. And the other key barrier is that this activity of aggregation requires a large portfolio. It requires size, okay? And there are several barriers to acquire this size, okay? First is the reluctance from some consumers to participate and engage in these services. For instance, some industrial consumers may show concerns that modifying their energy consumption patterns could affect their main industrial process. And they basically say, no, I will not do that, even if there is money. And the other barrier to gain size is that different countries may have different market interfaces and platforms. And this basically involves a higher transaction cost to enlarge basically the size of your market, okay, to access to trade flexibility internationally. So these are the main barriers we have observed basically for this review. And I just wanted to finish by highlighting the curiosity of, because the previous aggregators usually use a command and control approach. So I go to the market, I get dispatched, and I send a command basically with an automated system that controls the loads or generation. But there are some companies that are trying to do something similar, but instead of using a command and control, they use behavioral demand response. Okay, this is the case, for instance, of OnConnect active in the US and Canada. So what you see there is they go to the market, they send a notification to end consumers, and they remunerate the end consumers. The key difference is that basically the way they act on consumers on demand is not with an economic incentive. If you see here, there is no a pound sign, no a euro sign, a dollar sign. They just say, okay, tomorrow there is a critical hour, you can help the environment, you can go for a run, you can switch off your appliances, be a good citizen. That is the kind of message, using behavioral demand response. And maybe they can compare you to your neighbors, okay? And in the step 3 is after the market settlement, the type of rewards they get are probably not monetary, okay? They gave, you see here the case of OnConnect, they gave points. And these points can be exchanged by an Amazon gift card, a PayPal account, or maybe donate to your favorite NGO. So it's the same kind of logic, but instead of using only money as a driver, they are using this kind of non-monetary rewards. Okay? And this is, for instance, the kind of business model that Local Life, our partner in InteGrid, is trying to approach. And besides the general barriers that any aggregator may face, they face 2 main barriers. One is on accessing the data they need really to manage the risk when accessing the markets, the metering data, complying with privacy protections, and the other is essentially on customer engagement. Or again, they need a large customer base, and residential consumers, and we've seen a high variation between countries, may not be very eager to engage in these services. Sometimes they are quite, they reject energy companies in general. They don't like them. Okay, so that's, for instance, some of the behavioral institutional barriers we've seen. And with this, I've reached the end of my presentation. So I just wanted to finish with a message, and that is that, hey, we want to promote new business models that even if there is economic potential there, even if we adapt regulation for that, we should not neglect the fact that besides economics and regulation, market conditions and the end user perspective matters, okay, if we want to this business to do that. And with this, I think I give the floor to Ricardo Besa to focus then on the operational tools for DSOs. Thank you.
Okay, so Rafael, you already made a very good introduction about the barriers we have on some of the business models and the concepts we have on InteGrid. I would like to underline this lack of real-time monitoring on low voltage and medium voltage grids, because in fact, this is one of the major bottlenecks when we want to activate flexibility from consumers that are connected to those grids. What we are doing in InteGrid is that we are developing some tools and demonstrating some tools up to TRL 7 and 8 to address those barriers. So for real-time monitoring, we have load allocation from medium voltage and low voltage grid with state estimator, predictive management of low voltage also in the distribution grid, and multi-period optimal power flow and forecasting that we are integrating these with a commercial EDMS system from General Electric and the grid and market hub that was already explained by Rafael. So going more into details about these tools. So in terms of grid monitoring for the medium voltage, we developed this tool, we call it load allocation, because on medium voltage grids in general, you have real-time measurements from the SCADA, so voltage and current, for example, and then from the secondary substations. In the case, for example, of Portugal, they have meters, but those meters only make data available one time per day, sometimes with a 1 week delay. And the idea of this tool is to combine all this information, so real-time information and historically, recently collected data, and combine everything to give an idea of the current operating conditions of the medium voltage grid. On the low voltage grid, the concept, it's more or less the same, but in this case, we are using smart meters. And as you see here on the right-hand side, there is these green smart meters that have the capacity to provide data, voltage and active power every 15 minutes. And only with that information, we can estimate the voltage in all the nodes of this low voltage grid every 15 minutes, for example, for the meters that are highlighted in blue. And so this tool is able to estimate when we have new measurements from those green meters, the voltage, for example, on the low voltage. And we use this approach to include on the low voltage control tool that is illustrated here. There is some references that you can check later. I would like to underline this low voltage control is something that is located at the dispatch center of the DSO, but it can be also integrated on a concentrator on the secondary substation or an RTU. He uses the grid and market hub, as described by Rafael, as a hub to exchange flexibility data, but also to activate this flexibility from the home energy management system. And it also includes resources from the DSO, like OLTC and grid storage. And it uses forecast as an input, because this is a predictive approach, and also uses the state estimator that generates alarms when you have a voltage problem on the grid. Going to the medium voltage grid, this is the concept we are exploring in InteGrid. On this concept, the core function is this multi-period optimum power flow that somehow makes an operational scheduling of the flexibility for the next hours or next day. It includes different types of flexibilities. We are also including here storage, but also the rebound effect of demand response. That's also one reason to have this multi-period approach. and this is have some advantages. So it is a predictive management. So in advance, you can estimate how much flexibility you need to solve some technical problems on your grid or to handle some maintenance actions. It also gives some what-if analysis for human operators. This was something we implemented with GE in their ADMS, and also the possibility to minimize the global cost of flexibility activation. So it gives you an optimal solution. But it also comes with some disadvantages. One is we are solving a large-scale optimization to handle a local problem, so probably could think in more simple solutions. For this, it's very difficult to integrate uncertainty to decrease the scalability of the solution. This was something we assessed also in the project, and it is a centralized approach. So it means that this is running on a dispatch center where you have a human operator also checking the actions that the tool is providing. This tool was tested, was integrated with the GE, so the maturity with their ADMS, so the maturity is quite high in terms of readiness level. This was tested on a large medium voltage grid in Portugal and also in Slovenia. So the concept, Rafael already discussed this very well and presented this idea of the grid and market hub. So just to show you that the current situation we have in most countries is that we have communications between virtual power plants, DSOs, multiple DSOs, DSO, market operator, balancing responsible parties. What we want to do with the grid and market hub is to have a common platform that ideally is not owned by one DSO or by one TSO. It's shared by all these system operators, distribution and transmission, and that concentrates all this information, and it provides some standardized interface. So this tool, as Rafael mentioned, it's just more than a tool to exchange flexibility data. It also offers B2C and B2B services to consumers and to other stakeholders in the energy sector. Just to give you an example, in the project, in the InteGrid project, we concentrated all these resources in the grid and market hub and directly to the DSO dispatch center by using these interfaces. And those resources were not only residential consumers, there were around 300 consumers. There were also wastewater facilities in Portugal, industrial facilities in Portugal and Slovenia, renewable power plants, commercial buildings, smart public lighting. So we are able also to use this flexibility from smart public lighting and to integrate this flexibility in the grid and market hub, and then also on the DSO dispatch center, electric vehicles and grid storage. And so to conclude my presentation, I will just briefly tell you what was one of the use cases that we constructed and we demonstrated for the low voltage grid to activate flexibility. So we developed at INESC an hybrid inverter for PV and storage, a single hybrid power electronic inverter, also a home energy management system for smart appliances and small scale behind the meter storage, also electric vehicle supply equipment that was able to perform smart charging and control of the EV charging. And all of these resources, they were connected to this grid and market hub using a standardized interface. So any consumer with this home energy management system was able to communicate the flexibility they have available, the same for the EV charging, and also to receive activation signals for the flexibility from the smart grid functions that were at the DSO level, in this case, low voltage control, that also received some alarms from the low voltage state estimation. So in overall, this was one of the use cases that we completely demonstrated in Portugal in 2 low voltage grids that cover the whole chain of models from the consumer side and up to the grid side by using this grid and market hub that was built on the top of SAP Cloud Platform as a core function to enable all this exchange of information. The same was demonstrated for the medium voltage grid in 2 countries, Portugal and Slovenia. That was also in some way similar to this one. Okay, so I hand my presentation.